my buddy from back in the day, now back on the Rich Eisen Show, my friend Mike Mayock. Good to see you, Mike. How are you, sir?
Rich, I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Are you a hockey guy? I know you're a BC guy, and that's a big bean pot situation. Are you a hockey guy too, Mike? Are you?
Yeah. I couldn't sit here and have a conversation with you about the best players in the NHL, but my stepson just finished playing hockey up in Canada because I married a Canadian woman about 10 years ago, and because of that, I get to see more hockey than I ever saw, and I've seen so many funny memes about the what happened with USA and Canada the other day.
Right.
Did you see the one where the US coach, they used AI to put different words in his mouth at his press conference?
No, I didn't see that.
Oh my God. It looked like he said it was scary to me what they could make this guy sound like he was saying.
So again, I know you do the pod with Lee, your daughter. Just hearing you talk about AI and memes, I don't know who you are anymore. Who are you, Mike? You're into memes and AI? You're plugged in. Look at you,
I'm the
Mike.
kinder, friendlier Mike right now.
All right, fantastic. So let's just jump into a couple of things right here, Mike, as we're going to be heading to the Combine in about a week's time. And you've been looking at the incoming class here. Give me the deepest player group that we're going to see coming up in a week, Mike. What do you think here?
I think there are two or three groups that really intrigue me, Rich. The first is the defensive tackle group. I did a study the last 5 years at every position. And at the defensive tackle position, an average of about 9 defensive tackles go in the first 3 rounds. This year, I've got 20 plus guys that I could give first 3-round grades on, which is at least twice as many as a year ago, Rich. So there's quality at the top, led by 2 University of Michigan guys.
Yep.
There's depth that's mind-boggling. And what tells me as a former GM is that if I need one of those guys, I can probably find a quality starter in the 4th or 5th round at defensive tackle. So that's the group that jumped out at me. Secondly, were the tight ends. Again, quality at the top, along another Michigan guy, Loveland. I think he's a first-round pick. I think Tyler Warren from Penn State is fascinating. He's a first-round pick. Mason Taylor, son of Jason Taylor. I think I like him more than most people, but he kind of flashed at the Senior Bowl, and I think at worst he's going in a second. There are quality tight ends throughout all 3 days. And then, like usual, Rich, and which maybe prompts a bigger conversation, there are more running backs available in the draft every year than there are spots for them in the NFL. So the supply-demand curve for running backs is one of the reasons they've been undervalued for years now. But when I look at this running back class, Ashton Genty's a top 10 pick all day long for me. I think he's a top 5 talent in this draft. I love the kid. His contact balance is off the charts. Kid from North Carolina, Omarion Hampton. He's like 6 feet, 220. He's a big back with the fluidity of a smaller back. He can play on all 3 downs. He'll pass protect. He can catch the football. And again, to me, that's a first down back. And there's 2 kids from Ohio State, Quinshon Jenkins and Travion Henderson, both of whom I think go in the top 40. So you can go all through day 3 with good running backs that will fill rosters in the NFL. But the quality at the top is what really hits me. And really my big picture thing on the running backs, because of Saquon, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, all Joe Mixon, traded for a 7th-round pick. Every one of those guys balled out last year. And I think the whole conversation of running backs and their value needs to be reevaluated by GMs throughout the league.
All right, so that's a lot right there. Let me pull on a few strands. Interesting you mentioned the 2 Ohio State running backs. They're terrific, and it kind of brings it full circle of what you just said, because thankfully Chip Kelly decided kept running those guys directly into those 2 tackles from Michigan that you say are at the top of the draft. And you know I always take my shot at the Buckeyes if Michigan wins in a gratuitous manner. But that kid Tyler Warren, let's land on him for a little. anytime Penn State needed a big play, they kept looking for him. And so how do you think he's going to be based on the Brock Bowers moments that we saw this past year, and how maybe somebody's going to look at Tyler Warren or maybe even Loveland through the prism of Brock Bowers? Mike, what do you think there?
Yeah, they're different kind of players. And a year ago, I thought Tyler Warren was coming out, and they had another tight end at Penn State named Theo Johnson, who went in the 4th round
To the Giants.
and a lot of people had Theo Johnson over Warren. But this year, they started using Warren in a variety of ways. And I think the versatility he showed is tied in with the value for this year's draft. I mean, he lined up at Wildcat quarterback. He lined up at running back. He lined up in line. He lined up out wide. If you watch USC, I forget how many catches he had, but it was something like 15, 16 catches. I've never seen a tight end have that kind of game at the collegiate level before. So he's bigger. He'll remind you body type more of a Gronk, whereas a Loveland, that guy is a little bit smaller, more of like a Travis Kelce type.
Okay.
So it's a little different conversation. I think Loveland moves better than Warren moves, but Warren's a bigger body and blocks better. So it really is going to be what you ask. What flavor do you want? What are you going to ask the guy to do? And I think that I've actually got Loveland slightly ahead of Warren, only because in the NFL, I don't think Warren's going to be able to do the diversity of things he did at Penn State.
Mike Mayock here on the Rich Eisen Show. And let's get into the running back conversation. I think it is fascinating what you said, because it's a deep pool for this year's draft. But, I mean, my goodness, Saquon Barkley showed you what the value of a running back can be. And if you pay the guy, you can not only just take him from another team in your division, you can win a Super Bowl with him as a 2,000-yard rusher. Derrick Henry, you mentioned Josh Jacobs as well, who, if I'm not mistaken, you drafted in your first draft with the Raiders. Why is there such a sensibility amongst the general manager group about not paying running backs, or at least looking at this as the spot where you're going to save on the cap instead of spending for the value that you know you're going to get with somebody who's at the top end? Mike, walk me through this mindset, if you don't mind here.
It's supply and demand and financials, Rich. And it's the opposite of the quarterback conversation. We don't have 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So we push them up in the draft and we pay them money. The running back position, a little bit like a guard, a little bit like a safety, a little bit like an off the ball linebacker. When you think there are enough of those guys coming out of college football to staff starting rosters throughout the NFL, they don't get paid as much. Supply and demand. I think the general manager world in general kind of got caught up with, well, we can go get an Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th round and win a Super Bowl. And you can. And I don't deny that in the 3rd day of every draft, there are quality running backs. And you wouldn't say that about quarterbacks. You wouldn't say that about a lot of positions. But at running back, the colleges supply us with those quality players. My argument, Rich, is when you've got a difference maker, why the hell wouldn't you draft them, trade for them, sign them as a free agent at any position? And you saw what happened last year with the running backs. Quality running backs traded places in free agency. They all had big years. They all led their teams to playoffs. They all made it easier for their offensive lines and their quarterbacks to win football games. And to me, that's kind of the hidden thing beyond it all. And if you look at, pick a name, Najee Harris in Pittsburgh, right? They didn't even exercise the 5th-year option on him a year ago, where if they had, they could pay him $6 million this year. Instead, they rolled the dice. Najee went out and had his 4th consecutive 1,000-yard season. And if they franchise him, it'll be $13 million. So I kind of look at this thing and as we're out of whack a little bit, and I think you're going to see that start to settle down a little bit as general managers and head coaches say, you know what, quality at any position is critical, and we got to have that guy.
Mike Mayock here on the Rich Eisen Show. Speaking of quarterbacks and this quarterback class, I want to ask you about what Cam Ward had to say on Monday night after winning the Davey O'Brien Trophy. And he was asked about not playing in the second half of Miami's bowl game. And his response, I want to read it out loud for my radio audience, and then I'll have you comment, Mike. Okay, you're either going to draft me or you're not. If you don't draft me, that's your fault. You've got to remember you're the same team that's got to play me for the rest of my career, and I'll remember that. I just think we all got what we needed out of it, meaning playing in the first half of his bowl game. They've seen things that they think they need to work on for this season coming up, and they also knew what I had on the line. We feel like we're doing what's best for the program and myself. It was a hard decision, especially when some guys on our team didn't play who I thought should have played. Hold on a minute. He finishes up. Those guys thought about their future the same way I thought about mine. If I could do it again, I'd do it the same way. I wish we could have ended up winning the game. If we'd won the game, they wouldn't have said anything. And so that's usually how it goes. Take it on the chin and just keep pushing. How is this going to land in the evaluator class, Mike? What do you think?
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yes, sir.
As you read it to me, first and foremost, as far as not playing in the second half, to me, you make that decision on the way in and you either play the whole game, you're a teammate, you're a good teammate, you're in there to win a football game, or you let them know up front, I'm not playing. It can't be both. That decision, I don't like that, and I don't understand it. And the second piece of that I didn't like, and I think people will take notice of, is throwing teammates under the bus. And that's something an NFL quarterback has to learn very quickly in his career, that you're going to get paid more than everybody else. Therefore, you're going to have more responsibility than anybody else. And since you're being quoted more than anybody else, you got to be really cognizant of what you're saying. And throwing coaches and teammates under the bus generally doesn't work whatsoever. So they're the two things for me. And the last one is, I've done a lot of study on this kid, and I respect the fact. Do you know where he started his college career?
Go for it.
Incarnate Word. You ever hear of it?
Did they play at 2 a.m. on Saturday night on ESPN Plus? I don't know, Mike. You know, I hear you.
I don't think they ever played on TV, but he spent 2 years there, 2 years at Washington State, and a 5th year at Miami where he exploded. So I give the kid a ton of credit from coming from nowhere and forcing himself to the front of the line. But when you sit there, say you're gonna take names and numbers and all that kind of stuff, you better check your resume. If Deion Sanders says that, I'm all in. If I love when Amon-Ra St. Brown sits there, who was a 4th round pick and coming off 2 or 3 consecutive 100 reception years, goes, I know every friggin' wideout that get taken ahead of me, and he reels them off. I love that. But you got to be a little more careful when you're Cam Ward from Incarnate Word, etc.
Okay, so let me ask. So, what's he going to hear when he walks into the interview rooms next week in Indianapolis? A lot of what you just said, Mike, or do you think there's some other general managers who might take a different point of view and just say, kind of dig it, kind of like it, you're one of ours? What do you think, Mike?
Well, I'm hoping they're not going to ask him if he'd be a dog or a cat. I never really understood that one. They're going to dig into him a little bit, Rich. And if the higher you go in the draft, the more you got to pick at the scabs. And so do you like a little bit of confidence and bravado at that position? Hell yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm not discounting it, because Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I mentioned, has a chip on his shoulder and it drives him. And I like that. Okay. I like players that have a chip and it drives them. But that whole statement you just read opens up some conversations, and he's going to have to deal with it. And I think it's a great lesson also for him as he goes forward, because he's going to get quoted an awful lot going forward in his life.
Yeah, didn't Cam Newton said he wanted to be an icon, right, before he came into the combine? And you and I were talking about it on NFL Network, kind of like, what gives? But he did kind of become iconic, Mike, so sometimes a kid calling his shot like that is not a red flag, but maybe an indication that he's got it,
there's a different confidence and bravado can be two different things. And really, you only can find out what they are through the prism of hindsight. And if you look at Cam Newton recently, he just threw some other guys under the bus.
When he said he would want to win an MVP over a Super Bowl, is what you're saying, Mike?
No, when he ripped his teammates in Carolina for when he first got there, and then Steve Smith went after him.
He basically said they were losers before he got there.
That's right.
He called it a locker room full of losers. And you can imagine our buddy Steve Smith.
That's right. Oh, man. Before I let you go, Mike, word is that the Bengals, as franchise tagging opens today, they already had an issue with Jamar Chase last year and kicked that can to right now after franchise tagging T. Higgins last year. And there's Trey Hendrickson sitting out there as well after winning the sack race last year in the NFL. Idea is that the Bengals want to do all three of them. You know, Joe Burrow said, based on what he saw from the Eagles, hey, they seem to be paying everybody and they just want it all. How realistic is that for the Bengals, in your estimation, to go sign Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Trey Hendrickson long-term, or at least get them all to agree to whatever they have in mind? Mike?
I think it's very difficult to actually do. And let's walk through it quickly, and you can tell me what direction you want to go. But
sure,
there is a Joe Burrow factor. You know, he signed in 23, 5-year extension. He's very willing to work with Cincinnati, just like Patrick Mahomes always has been. And they continue to kick down that contract down the road in Kansas City. Now, the cap for this year in the NFL is about $272 million. Burrow's average is $46 million on his new contract, which is about 17% of the cap, which interestingly is about where you want a quote franchise quarterback to be, plus or minus 17% of your cap. Okay, so Burrow's right there. If they franchise tag T. Higgins again, that'll be $26 million. Okay, so Burrow's at 46, T would be at 26. The Jamar Chase thing is a hard conversation because he's coming off a triple crown. They probably should have taken care of him a year ago.
Yeah.
He's the best wideout in football. Justin Jefferson's got about a $35 million average. So, you know, you got to figure he's worth 38 to 40, and he's going to want it. And by the way, he's earned it. Okay? So would they dare kick that can down the road and pay him $22 million this year and say, hey, we can go tag you next year? I don't think they should, and especially because they have one of the best quarterbacks in pro football, and you want him to be all in. So it starts to look to me a little bit, Rich, like the Peyton Manning Indianapolis Colts back in the day with Bill Polian as the GM. And what they did was they put all their money on offense. And it was Peyton, it was Edgerrin James at tailback, it was whoever the prime wideout was, Marvin or
Reggie
Wayne, right?
Mm-hmm.
They pushed all the money on offense, and then defense was incumbent to draft well and sign cheap free agents and hang in there. We're going to win with offense, which brings me to Trey Hendrickson, right? He's going to be 31 in December. The top edge rusher, I think, is Nick Bosa at like 34 million, maybe. So I don't even know if he's making half of 34 million right now. But if you were, say, go out and you want to pay him 30 million, which I don't think they would or could, if you add up Burrow, Chase, Hendrickson, and Higgins based on the numbers I just gave you, it's about 140 million, or approximately 52% of your salary cap on 4 players. So you got to pay 49 players with 48% of your cap. I think their priority, because of Burrow, are going to be the 2 wideouts. And then try and get Hendrickson done too. But heading into, age 31 at this point, I think they could get it done. But it's all about structure. You can't cheat the salary cap. You can delay it. And all those numbers I just gave you were averages, not necessarily for this year or next year, just averages. So there are ways with signing bonuses to mitigate some of that. So it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and that's probably way more than you wanted to hear. That's me putting the GM cap on and trying to explain it. Those are the challenges, Rich.
It's perfect. That was awesome. My only problem is that unlike the NFL cap, I can't kick my heart out down the road here on our radio. So I think we've hit that part of our cap. Mike, you're the best. I can't thank you enough for wanting to do this every Tuesday through the draft. Can't wait to do this every single week with you.
Thanks, brother.
You're the man. That's Mike Mayock. Everybody check him and Lee Mayock out on the Believe Podcast Network. And, of course, here on the Rich Eisen Show every single Tuesday. God, I love talking to Mike. Makes me smarter. Makes me want to talk more ball with him. And thankfully, we shall.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.